The meme I'm deciding to do an analysis on today has been out of the popular consciousness for about a year, so I can never really be accused of being topical or on the ball with these sorts of things, but the original rough script of it is about a year old, so at least I have that going for me. Yeah, the whole Iceberg meme format was a lot more chic and in last summer compared to this summer. I don't even know what this summer is about, to be honest. Maybe I'll understand next year. Let's be real, has anybody even thought the words "the Wario apparition" in the last 9 months? I have my doubts. Either way, we are, for better or worse, going to be talking about Mario 64. A game that, unsurprisingly, I'm a pretty big fan of. I know, controversial, unpredictable, searing hot take from a millennial-aged Nintendo fan. Mario 64. Would you believe it? I enjoy it. Shocker of shockers. In fact, if you can believe it, even compared to when I wrote a glowing appraisal of it a few years back, my appreciation for the game has only swelled further. There's something about the environment, the atmosphere, the free-form progression, and the limber flexibility of the game's control scheme that has stood up better and better to time, even when compared to experiences like Odyssey, Sunshine, and Galaxy. For me, it's a game that's so easy to return to. It's like a warm and familiar hoodie. No matter where I pop into the game at, I'll have a pretty solid idea of all the different things I can do at any given moment. And because of how flexible the game is, I feel like I can still, after 20 years, approach the same mission with a slightly different tack that keeps the experience feeling fresh. Or maybe I could just stretch my not at all speedrunner muscles and try to blow through a mission at the highest speed possible. And then I can watch an actual speedrun and start developing an inferiority complex about it. Yay. And I'm not alone in a specific sort of affection for this game either. An entire subculture has germinated around this game, and it is off the fucking walls. If I'm being honest with you, the community surrounding this game has been off the walls for quite some time now. Specifically the speedrunning community, which I am convinced is fully stocked with insane people who break the barriers of reality for breakfast. But even outside of the always robust speedrunning community for this game, there's been a more recent resurgence of interest in it from an audience that's a bit more casual. A summer 2020 renaissance of the game. I'll get into speculation of the why for this a bit later, but first I think we should look into the how. And the how in this question could best be summarized by the Mario 64 Iceberg.
Hey everyone, Future Deleter here. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that this is not a strict analysis of the constituent parts of the Mario 64 Iceberg. It's more of an analysis of the psychological and maybe even social elements for our attraction to this sort of content, more than going through an exhaustive examination of each part of it. There's many people who've done videos to that effect. I'll include some links in the description if that's what you're looking for, but this ain't really that. But I still will be talking about some parts of the iceberg a little bit.
I just adore this stupid image, primarily because it hits upon so many of the elements specific to the community surrounding this one game. The iceberg is a composite of a lot of different aspects of the game and its surrounding discourse, both diegetic, hypothetical, and esoteric. The iceberg also includes a number of rumors surrounding the game's development, like Miyamoto stealing Mario 64 from Argonaut, the Metal Mario texture and yellow cap switch, and Blarg. There are also some interesting, plausible theories surrounding elements of the game, like Womp King turns into the castle, how Bowser got into the castle with his sub, and El Israel 2401. In addition to some theories that are a bit more out there, a little bit less plausible, such as the true location of the painting worlds, and Mario 64 acting as a Freemason initiation ceremony. Yep. And finally, of course, as things tend to go online, Creepypasta comes in, such as the Wario apparition, every copy of Mario 64 being personalized, the haunted dirt texture of Bob-omb Battlefield, and the July 1995 build. The insatiable hunger of human curiosity makes an image like this so tantalizing, because it's just odd enough that it has the potential to pique imagination. Furthermore, having played this game time and time again, I could recognize only perhaps a few things listed on this image, and even then my knowledge was little more than surface, so to speak. So of course I had to look into some of the stuff that was there, and whoo boy, it was wild. Some of it was just kinda cool discoveries or theories about the game, like realizing that the skybox of the level Wet Dry World was an actual image of Caceres in Spain, or that the Metal Mario texture was a highly compressed and edited fisheye image of flowers. That stuff's just kinda cool. Even more tantalizingly, this iceberg led me to discover a debug menu that listed a bunch of level names that don't appear anywhere in the finished game. Or there's just any of the other miscellaneous strangeness that exists tangibly in the game that might give you pause and consider the game and its development in a new light. A lot of this is elucidated by YouTube user Mishkaz's critical, yet not exhaustive examination of the iceberg. In addition, there is also the Mipshole Wikia, which is dedicated to just this very topic, but often lacks an appropriate level of incredulity in its editorial stance, so just approach that source with some skepticism, will ya? While we're on the subject, the Wikia itself admits to playing up the fiction of many of its theories and portraying them as factual to, quote, experiment with creative writing and creepy concepts.
Hello, this is Future Delita again from the weary world of editing. I have to be honest though, in editing, I looked for this quote. I even searched it up in Google, and all I found was a link to my WordPress blog that quoted this, so perhaps they removed it. I didn't make this up. Maybe the wiki is personalized.
This is perfectly cool and all, but that caveat is placed more on the back end of the website than a description of the game as, quote, an insidious monster of human creation, which is on the front page. And you know, as a nitpicky aside, in the most semantic of complaints, I don't like the misuse of the word conspiracy as a linguistic stand-in for theory, urban legend, or myth, but that's a battle I accept that I'm losing, so whatever. But wait, let's take a step back. This is all super fucking weird, right? That all the ink spilled in the last couple of pages doesn't even begin to scrape at the depths of the memes, theories, myths, creepypastas, and straight up fabrications that surround this game. That's pretty bizarre. Theories and myth-making are popular modes of discourse surrounding video games, but rare is a game that sets such a fertile plot of land that it can still be farmed for this topic 2.5 decades after its release. Especially when it is a paltry 8 megabytes of data that is persisting in this arena in an age of games that can be 50 to 100 gigabytes. So, what's going on with Mario 64? How has the eternal oddness of this game's place within the consciousness of those who played it remained so intact after so much time? Well, that's precisely the idea I'm hoping to breach by rambling for a little bit here. I think Mario 64's place in time is an extremely important part of explaining the game's place within people's consciousness. The game was a launch title for the N64 released in September 1996, and that time period I'd say falls pretty firmly into the internet not yet being quite so common era, which means that it was released into the golden age of the playground theory era of video games. If that phrase I made up is not immediately comprehensible to you, it simply refers to any of the nonsense that kids would hear about their favorite video games that they would then pass along to their friends through a network of symbolic telephones. This would happen until, yes, absolutely, Luigi was under that truck and you was in Mario 64. Wait, no, scratch that, reverse them, and there you go. Without the tacit oversight provided by being able to look up any given detail about any game ever released to the public at large on the internet and find the verifiable truth about it, misinformation and hearsay is given the perfect environment to grow. And there's a mutually symbiotic relationship here. There was already something mysterious about the large, open-ended worlds of games like Pokemon, Legend of Zelda, and Mario 64, and these unverifiable myths only added to the mystique of them. Of course, kids weren't thinking about the technological limitations of what could be contained within a small cart of limited memory capacity. The only limitation was what they could imagine to be real. As a kid, I had my head turned all the way upside down by revelations in the game proper, like how entering certain levels like Wet Dry World and Tick-Tock Clock in certain ways changed their properties, and I got seriously tripped out and more than a little bit spooked by the endless staircase and the associated shepherd tone melody. And I furthermore discovered, sometimes with assistance, the somewhat obscure ways you could get to relatively hidden locations like the Sunken City in Wet Dry World, the Secret Slide in Tall Tall Mountain, and the Cliffside in Cool Cool Mountain. With all these things in mind, it would only seem plausible that there could be more things that were hidden behind the curtains. So when another kid would tell me that there was a level in the inaccessible Bowser painting in the first area of the castle, or that you could unlock Luigi by doing X, Y, and Z, it didn't seem that far-flung. I mean, why not? The game already hit a goddamn level inside the belly of a Boo. What's so strange about Luigi being somewhere in here? I didn't know the limitations of development that led to Luigi being removed, and I wouldn't have understood it even if you did tell me. All I knew was that it seemed weird that Luigi, who was practically in every other Mario game I had played, was missing. And kids are stupid, but they're not dumb. So you kind of start looking for intuitive explanations that would make sense of this transgressive disinclusion of Luigi. Crime against humanity. And it was this very mentality that led to the development of myths and legends surrounding Luigi being in Mario 64, some of which came with ridiculous conditions of unlocking that absolutely breached the limits of plausibility, and were likely just cooked up by someone to waste a person's time. You know, you can call it obnoxious or ridiculous if you want. I think it merely demonstrates how the playground theory approach to video games worked. Forget reality or tangibility, just go for what tickles the imagination centers of the brain the most. If the way to unlock Luigi seemed implausibly obscure, it just means that it'd be that much cooler if it is real. And stranger still, due to the prominence of Mario 64 in the childhood of so many people, this approach, the idea that there remains something mysterious and intangible just beyond the drawn curtain, remains to this day. This idea reached its apotheosis, whether people realize it or not, in the form of the ridiculous every copy of Mario 64 is personalized meme. In this meme slash theory thing, throw some scare quotes around theory, please, in your head. The hazy subjectivity of each person's childhood memories of playing the game are extrapolated into a theory that the game is modifying its contents, gameplay, events, environments, and objects to attune to the psychological desires of the player, thus personalizing the cart. This is blatantly false and impossible, but it's at least interesting as a purely theoretical idea. Theoretical. Okay? Not real. That people make mock-ups, mods, and hacks of the game that create new environments, songs, situations, and objectives using Mario 64 assets is, however, a really cool runoff of this meme. I will say of my personal experience, however, that I really thought, based on experiences from early childhood I feel like I remember, that one tree in the castle's courtyard would give infinite one-ups if you climbed to the top of it and went upside down, and crawling could get you up that slope in Bob-Omb Battlefield. I've tested these things as an adult. They don't work. So I guess that must be the personalization at work, huh? I think somewhat obviously that a lot of this wouldn't be as much of an element in the community without the intersecting of the aforementioned factors. Those factors being 1. The game being released in the 1990s before the meteoric rise of internet access in American households. 2. Its prominence within the childhoods of many children in the 1990s who played the game, mostly in their pre-internet lives. And 3. The sort of innate, mysterious qualities of the game in and of itself. Alright, I'll admit that last one is a bit of a curveball compared to the more tangible material explanations given by the first two reasons, but I don't think it should be overlooked as a factor because of that. Even if it's a bit less concrete than the other reasons presented, I still think it plays a role. Okay, let's be real for a second here. Mario 64 is a sort of strange feeling game. I know I described it as being a comfy hoodie that I can return to again and again, and that my intimate familiarity with it makes it enjoyable to return to, but that doesn't scrub it of its strangeness. A lot of this can be chalked up to the game being a launch title for the N64. Simply speaking, the technology of making a 3D game was not well worn or even really understood at this point. The benchmark for making a world realistic or immersive in 3D at that point was astonishingly low. Mario 64 wasn't competing with goddamn Breath of the Wild or something. It wasn't even competing with Ocarina of Time. It was competing with shit like Bubsy 3D. Okay, not actually Bubsy 3D most of the time, but you get it. We were really in the primeval sludge phase of 3D gaming at this point, and Mario 64, despite being really, really good and all that, was still a product of that time. And to be honest, that time persisted into the early 2000s. Things relating to the graphics of the game, including assets, environments, objects, textures, character models, etc., are all sort of funky, and in the case of textures, they're also kind of smudgy and hazy. The game also mixes 2D sprites with 3D objects in a way that is mildly discombobulating. And this is all just because limitations of the hardware meant that rendering a large amount of active 3D objects at once would overclock the system. Hence, the game was designed to have few rendered 3D objects on the screen at once, lending it a sort of starkness. I've seen comments to the effect of describing this game as having a sort of emptiness, and I can see where that's coming from. I've even seen a video recently where someone, I think hyperbolically, describes the game as disturbing. I don't think I agree with that assessment that this overall cheery and breezy mainline Mario game is disturbing, but some aspects of the game's age have rendered it with a somewhat off-kilter feeling. For example, a lot of the models only somewhat resemble what would later become the standard aesthetic for Mario, and being that this was the first attempt to render these characters in 3D, it can definitely look weird sometimes. Like, what the fuck is all of this? What's all of that? Sort that out. That's a mess. Get it together. You're supposed to be a king. This is shameful. And if the starkness and smudginess of this game's graphics are applied to bleaker and darker levels, like Wet Dry World, Hazy Maze Cave, and Big Boo's Haunt, the effect can be slightly uneasy. In particular, people have some interesting theories about the, quote, negative emotional aura of Wet Dry World, but what that comes down to is mostly just a mix of the dark, atmospheric music track, the barren architecture of the location, the sunken city, the distorted and dreamlike skybox, and the weird mix of mechanical enemies, and... You know, maybe I underestimated the bad aura of this level, huh? For me, though, Hazy Maze Cave is a more disorienting and uneasy experience than Wet Dry World. There's just something about the combination of subdued music, muddy color palette, numerous death traps and pitfalls, unfamiliar creatures, and ease with which I get utterly lost in this place that makes it one of the more unsettling locations in the game, and in the series. Just comparing this to later Mario titles where the spooky levels in those games never feel anything but comical, or at its most intense like a G-rated haunted house, there can be a genuine uneasiness you might feel with these levels. Even if Mario 64 was aspiring to nothing more than just that, a G-rated haunted house, the game's clumsy and off-kilter execution of early 3D graphics lands them somewhere in the realm of the dreamlike or slightly uncanny. For more solidly defined level locations, especially early on in the game like Cool Cool Mountain and Bob-omb Battlefield, the effect is mostly subdued, but it feels like the farther the game goes along, the stranger its level premises get. And this all builds up to the final level Rainbow Ride, which feels like a dream of floating through the sky on a carpet, or with the second to last level Tick-Tock Clock being like a hazy fever dream where you explore the inner workings of a clock. On a side note, Tick-Tock Clock, all the gears and moving parts reminds me of a recurring dream that I had as a young child that always kind of freaked me out, so I kind of associate that level with that dream. This doesn't really matter, but it is something I just thought of as I was recording this, so that's neat. And more generally than these specific eccentricities, many people have pointed out that a lot of the levels in this game are just sort of floating in an indeterminate space, Womp's Fortress being a great example of this. Now this is of course just a function of the limited capacity of the hardware to render a more meaningfully complex backdrop for the stages, but that's tech speak. In the world of the game, these levels are just floating there, and this means that they have a kind of off-kilter quirkiness to them as a result. I mean, how often do you just see floating islands? Outside of Studio Ghibli movies, I guess. The media I could say this is most closely analogous to is VHS tapes. In the heyday of DVD, VHS was derided as an outmoded format with suboptimal aspect ratio and blurry picture quality. And that's not wrong, it does have all those issues. But there's a lot of love for VHS in spite of, and often as a result of all these factors. YouTube video essayist and soy defender H Bomber Guy goes more in depth on this topic than I could ever really, so I'll just defer the subject of VHS onto him. And to pilfer from the comments of that video, Brian Eno once said of this affection for outdated formats, quote, "Whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature." And to return this back to the subject at hand, the signature of the N64 was a sort of low-res, vacant, dreamy aesthetic, achieved more or less by an accident of technological limitations. If we can clearly interpret every object, backdrop, texture, and enemy in a game's environment with no pause, then creating your own narratives to fill in the blanks of your understanding doesn't really happen, because there aren't really any blanks to fill in the first place. Not that higher resolution games, or high-def video, or high-fidelity music for that matter, are bad things robbing from the artfulness of their respective mediums, just that there could arguably be something getting lost in the advancement of technology here. Of course, there's probably a lot more that's being gained in these advancements, but whatever. That filling in of the blanks that I just mentioned cues up directly to the idea of playground video game theory, which itself leads into my next point describing why I think so much of this stuff is so popular. I really do think it has to do with the desire to recapture childhood wonder. Yeah, we're doing this bullshit angle. You know, Mr. Rogers was born, lived, and died, and yet the eternal child within all of us lay mostly dormant. What the hell is that all about? What got fucked up along the way? Well, lots of stuff did. I'm not gonna go too far into this because I am talking about a fucking Mario game, but I think among my age and national United States demographic, there exists a sort of collective trauma pertaining to how we came of age. Many people who are the core Mario 64 fanbase are in their mid to late 20s and 30s, So, millennials. Millennials in America are united by a common experience of the 9/11 attacks, just as baby boomers are united by the JFK assassinations. For me particularly, 9/11 happened shortly before I turned 8, and I was sort of thrust into real-world events through it. I remember seeing the footage of the towers billowing with smoke playing on TV that evening still. My mother and sister lived in Manhattan at that time, so it hit pretty close to home for me. I'm not saying my experience is the experience of everyone within my age demographic, but I think that there was an erosion of safety and security that 9/11 represented. The 2008 financial crash was another one of these erosions. Though I was only 14 at the time for that, I came of age in the shadow of its influence. And COVID-19 now is another one. And those are just the shared experiences I can reasonably universalize among Americans of this age. Obviously, the experiences of people of color, religious minorities, LGBTQ populations, and impoverished peoples have had their own particular erosions of feelings of security, or perhaps they were never afforded that security in the first place. Within these circumstances, it becomes really difficult to create the feeling of security through material conditions to create a sense of true comfort, at least on our own. But we can emulate the emotional qualities of childhood at least somewhat. A time of security, a time where things didn't seem so dangerous and so unsure. And that's where Mario 64 comes in. As already established, Mario 64 was an element of so many people's childhoods and often bled into their later life. They probably grew up playing it and maybe aged up into looking up whether Luigi was in the game on janky Web 1.0 GeoCities websites. And then they possibly reached mental maturity and created reasoned or impassioned cases for why it's a classic. Not to say that this is a whatsoever universal experience or that their life revolves around this game or something, just that it's a persistent presence. Furthermore, the game is sort of a strange experience, slightly hazy and dreamlike in a manner similar to old VHS tapes, filled with strange quirks, details, and atmospheric touches that lend an air of mystery to it. However, if hoping to recapture the playground-style thought of the past, people are going to have to learn some new tricks, because in this age of ROM dumps, source codes, hacking, modding, and information accessibility, the imagination that arises from filling in the gaps of the unknown is just a lot harder to come by. And it's here that we return to the iceberg. I think it's not entirely accidental that in the summer of 2020, having an entire spring already dominated by COVID-19 and looking upon the remainder of 2020 looking similar, this escapist imagination playground would appear, appealing directly to a lot of people's nostalgic sensibilities. And while a good part of the iceberg is made up of stuff that's actually in the game, or at least theories relating to it, parts of it, like Delicious Cake, the Wario apparition, the Bowser painting, the July 1995 build, and the white-eyed Chain Chomp, are complete fabrications. They have little more to show than fuzzy videos of gameplay from mods of the game where these things were made to exist. Something going far enough as justifying the gameplay's authenticity under the banner of each cartridge being personalized. Henceforth, the shown content won't appear in your copy because your copy is different than this copy because this copy is personalized just like your copy is personalized. It's all pretty silly, honestly. However, I can't deny that there's a somewhat evocative quality to a lot of it. Particularly compelling are the videos of YouTube user Mario Nova 64, who has a body of videos that serve as a thesis of combining the familiar, the framework of assets and models used in Mario 64 at base, with the alien, new environments, music tracks, scenarios, and a HUD borrowed from a beta build of the game. This all taken together creates an effect that feels like a memory that you never remembered that you had, or maybe a dream that you had forgotten. Mario Nova 64 also doesn't burden their videos with the sort of cliched, creepy quality of many other people's creations in this micro-genre of fake Mario 64 content, but it has a slightly unsettling quality nonetheless. YouTuber Jeff Tastic does videos of a similar quality. Weirdly plausible, but if you've played the game, obviously not real. Videos like these, and also the more overtly creepypasta-esque videos about the Wario apparition or the July 1995 build, all serve a similar sort of function, I think, of creating a tangible, if still smudgy and dreamlike reality to those same playground discussions about this game from the late 90s. Mario Nova 64's video Breaking the Barrier is a great example of this. Remember earlier I had mentioned a fellow kid telling me when I was younger that you can enter the Bowser painting past the trap hole, something that is impossible in-game? This Breaking the Barrier video demonstrates an alternate reality where getting past the trap hole is possible, and what happens if you manage to do it. It's like a video documenting the imagination of a kid spinning a tall tale to their friend, but I'm watching it right here. And you're not supposed to be able to watch imagination, so it's no wonder it seems so fuzzy. I think in totalizing this microgenre, we can see a desire not to necessarily see all of this fake stuff actually be in the game, because we understand that's pretty much impossible. Outside of the modding community, of course. Oh yeah, and how could I forget the inevitable modulation of your cart's properties by your subconscious desires? What? Where was? Okay, yes. We can see a desire not to necessarily see all this fake stuff in the game, because that's impossible, but to return to a point when we could believe that it actually was all there, just behind the curtain. Bit out of your personal reach, maybe, but something you can definitely tell your friends about, when mystery was enticing rather than anxiety-inducing. Mario 64 may be a teeny bit creepy, or maybe just unsettling, but it's the creepiness of a ghost story you share around the campfire, the occasional macabre interests of an 8-year-old, and innocent sort of offness. All of the works in this microgenre are a valiant and I think pretty effective effort to inject that same feeling of mystery and intrigue you would attach to a game you loved as a kid, to expand the scope of the game beyond the cart that it was shipped out on in 1996, to have it encompass new myths, passageways, levels, elements, and assets, to make the mythos of the game as big as the collective weight of everyone's subjective experience talking and thinking about it. In a weird way, the Iceberg has actually succeeded in making Mario 64 bigger. It reminds me of another item from that Iceberg that I haven't talked about yet, that being the internal plexus of the castle. This is a concise way of saying all the stuff that is allegedly in the castle couldn't possibly fit in the castle based on how big the model of it is in-game, which is more of a literalist observation than a real flaw of the game, but this idea of the internal plexus maps pretty well onto what I'm saying as well. The internal plexus of the Mario 64 cart has a very concrete set of data and literal space limitations that make the plexus of the game's internet mythology impossible to fit into the cart, but yet, here we are. Something much larger, people's collective compendium of goofy spook stories, imagined events, and experience has been made to fit into the scope of something that is, in fact, limited by the bounds of reality as it is. But since when have we let reality get in the way of a good story?
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video of me talking about the Mario 64 Iceberg and the socio-political circumstances that led to it becoming such a phenomenon a year ago. If you enjoyed the video, do all that engagement type stuff. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a bell ring. I'm going to be trying to make more of these videos. If I find there's a taste for them, I'll definitely be making more. It'll be fun, it'll be cool, and I'll just enjoy talking about video games some, because yeah, this is fun. I don't know what else to tell you. But yeah, like, share, subscribe, do the things. That's right. Do the things. You already know all the things. Like, share, and subscribe. It's the greeting of the Gen Zer. Gen Alpha, actually. They're the ones who really, like, live with this stuff. I'm just rambling now. See you all next time. This has been Delita, signing out.